This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it's time for Avoid the Maze, that journey through life. And the interesting part is I'm going on this journey with somebody who I've known for about 6 years. No, almost 7 years, Paul. When you walked into our studio and you said, I think I'd like to do a show on New Cleveland Radio. And it was like, oh, okay. How'd you hear about us? Oh, at the Chinese restaurant. Love it, love the Chinese restaurant in Brecksville, Frankie's Walk. They have connected me with some great people, including Paul Seaburn, who has a show on New Cleveland Radio called What in the World with Paul Seaburn. But today, Paul, you're going to share your journey, because what I know about you, you grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. You grew up in what some people call the White Sox country, which is Parma. You went to a Catholic school. You went to a Jesuit college. You did a bunch of things, but you did a lot in comedy. And yet your degree is in information technology. Is that
Yes.
funny?
Yeah. I didn't know how long you were going to go there, Karen. Yeah.
I mean, I'm just amazed when I look at your journey. So I'm going to ask you, give us a little bit of background, who you really are and how you got to writing the book we're going to talk about today.
Oh, sure. Yeah. When thinking about the name of your show, Avoid the Maze, um, I was thinking, wow, how am I going to explain my career? Because what I normally describe it as a long, strange journey, which from the song, and that's kind of true. But it's also been a maze. I've taken so many different turns and backtracked and gone this way and that way that I was trying to think, how can I turn this into a positive, avoiding the maze, when really I was maybe in a maze. But let's talk about it, and maybe we can figure out where it's not a maze and it's something that maybe other people. So yeah, I grew up in Parma, Ohio, the home of Goulardi. It still amazes me to this day how many people remember Ernie Anderson and Goulardi and watching the horror movies on Friday nights. What a great childhood that was. You and I and my sidekick on the show, John Donalo, who also grew up in Parma. But it's amazing how we all share those memories and how many people still remember them. It's
Sure.
just wild. So yeah, I went to Catholic school, Catholic grade school, 8 years of nuns, Catholic high school, 8 years of Franciscan, or 4 years of Franciscans, Catholic college, 4 years of Jesuit. So that's 16 years of Catholic education. It took me that many years of therapy to get over it. That so much of that amount of one type of education is and religious education, really. We joke about it, but it does have an effect on you. We talked about this. I'm still a church-going person. Because I remember, I try to go back to where I was back when I was a kid. That's when it really meant a lot to me. And the physical building that I go to is a nice, quiet place that takes me to a good place in my life. So when people ask me about that, that's my simple answer.
Sure.
I cherish my Catholic education. I joke about it a lot, but it's funny. I was at a concert yesterday, ran into a former principal from my high school. Now, he wasn't there when I was there, but he and his wife started there shortly after I graduated. He just retired after 44 years at the school. And it's still a good school. It gave me a good education, and it gave me a start in the computer business. Back when I went to school, we talk about this. It was the punch card era.
Right.
So punch cards, reel-to-reel tapes, really, prehistoric computer technology. And we were the first school in Cleveland to have a computer programming class, Padua Franciscan High School up in Parma. We used to go to another school that was teaching key punching. So we would go there and use their punch card machines. And then we would go to Union Carbide on Rockside Road, also in Parma, where one of our teachers had a connection, and we could go there and run our little simple programs to make lights flash and add numbers, really simplistic things. But it got me into a good college program at John Carroll University, where I majored in math. It was the only school that had computer classes, and that was the only major that had computer training, was the math department. So it was a good start. So I went there. I learned about more about programming, more about back then there was the history of computers and terminology and weird stuff like that. So those two things, the degree in math and the computer programming training, got me some good jobs in the computer field. That's kind of where I wanted to go. I wanted to get into computers. I didn't want to be a math teacher. So let's stop for a second here and look at the maze. Was there a maze there anywhere? Not really.
No, it was a straight path, sort of. Yeah.
Straight path. Yeah, straight path from programming in high school, programming in college, programming in the business world. And so I started as a programmer. I realized that I wanted to advance much faster than I saw opportunities at my first job. So I answered an ad for a systems analyst. I didn't know what a systems analyst was, but it sounded better than a. And they mentioned COBOL, which was a programming language back then. They were looking for people who, and I knew that. Okay, so I thought, I can bluff my way into this job maybe, and I did. And that was a turn for me, because it was. What a systems analyst was at that company was a person. We sold computers. We actually sold computer terminals and computers. And the analyst would work with the potential buyer to figure out what would be the best product for them, like a salesperson, a technical salesperson. I didn't know that kind of job existed. So, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it, because I got to go out and meet people. I got to get up and give presentations, something that I never, that I thought I might be good at, and I had a great time doing it. And I worked for two really, really good companies in the computer field back in the 80s that were very leading edge, well known at the time. And so that was a turn. That was a turn. When one of the salespeople at one of the companies moved to another company, so we had a going away party for him. And at the going away party, one of the many of the other people who were there did a roast. Now this, I had no idea what a roast was, and they told funny stories and picked on him, and we just had a great time. And I thought, wow, that was a lot of fun. That was fun doing that. So the next time somebody else left, I went to my boss and I said, if we're having a going away party, are we doing a roast? And he says, yeah, you're doing it. So, so I ended up coming up with some funny things to say. And wow, I had such a good time doing that I thought, gee, I need to figure out how to do this more. And at that time, the only way I could do that was by going away parties, convincing people to quit so I could.
I love it.
So we would, you can relate to this. My wife and I would go to comedy shows, sure. And this was before the comedy boom. It was just starting in the 80s. So there weren't that many comedy clubs. And we saw Jay Leno when he was still starting out, and Jerry Seinfeld, and people who aren't even, I hate to say who have passed on, but sure. who aren't doing comedy anymore. And then I got transferred to Houston, Texas. And if for a kid growing up in Cleveland and in Parma, that was like going to another world. It was hot weather. It was a completely different culture, different politics, different food. We fell in love with Mexican food and all that good stuff. And there were a few more comedy clubs there. So I started going to comedy clubs more often. And one of them had a class it said in a class in comedy writing, learn how to write funny. And I thought, this is perfect. By that time I was in management. I was giving more presentations. I thought, this is great. I can learn how to work more things into my routine, my teaching and my presentation. Well, what it turned out to be, Karen, was a class on how to be a stand-up comedian. And
Oh,
the writing was writing for your own act. So it's like writing a 5-minute act, and the graduation was a show. So your job was to pass out free tickets and round up as many of your friends as you could to load up the audience with friendly people who would laugh at you and laugh at your jokes. I'm sorry. And that's what we did. And we had a full house. There were probably about 7 or 8 other people in the class with me. We all got laughed. We all had such a good time. So I thought, whoa, that was a lot of fun. So I started going to open mic nights. Now, so there's a turn. There's a turn right there. I never saw stand-up comedy as a career. So there was maybe not a maze, but a sharp curve where an aspect of my work, giving presentations, and an aspect of my my other life, maybe a hobby, going to comedy shows, kind of curved me to this comedy club where an opportunity presented itself in front of me, a class. And taking that class put me into on a completely different path that we'll get to in a minute. So by that time, I was selling computers. I'm selling $1 million computers during the day, and at night I'm going to comedy clubs and trying to get 10 people to laugh. That doesn't pay any bills, none
right.
whatsoever. So I had to make some decisions there, and also take advantage of things that were put in my path. One of them was I was working. I was getting jobs as a comedian. I was an opening act for headliners. One of the headliners that I worked for was a lady by the name of Diana Jordan. And while I was on stage, she was sitting at the bar with my wife and crying about breaking up with her boyfriend. And my wife was kind of paying attention and kind of listening to me. And then Diane stopped, and she said, my wife says. She stopped and she started listening to my act. And she turns to Donna, my wife, and she says, "Oh, I like that joke. You think he'd sell it to me?" And Donna, quick thinking lady that she is, she says, "Sure, how much?" So it turns out that Diane had an opportunity presented to her. She was hired simple term. She was hired, given a development deal with CBS, where they gave her a bunch of money to not talk to any other networks while they tried to find a show for her.
Sure.
So she had some money, and she was looking to upgrade her act a notch. And so she liked the material that I was doing, and I thought, this is great. This way I can keep my day job, which is paying the bills, and still be involved with the comedy world, which I really like. So I ended up working for Diane. I found out that other comedians also bought jokes from writers like me. And so that's where that went. So I did that for a while. And then another friend of mine in the comedy business called me up and said, I don't know if you heard this, but Jay Leno is becoming the Monday night host of The Tonight Show. Back at that time, Johnny Carson was the host. He was on 4 days a week. On Friday was Goulardi, I think, or one of those two. Something was on Fridays. And Johnny decided he wanted to take Mondays off too. So he wanted a permanent guest host, and Jay was selected to be the host. And I said, wow, I didn't know that. In fact, it was Diane. Diane said, and he's looking for writers, and you'd be good at it. So I said, wow, how do I find out more? And she said, I don't know. You do it. It's up to you. So I wrote a bunch of jokes, watched some shows, wrote a bunch of jokes, put them in an envelope, mailed them to the Tonight Show, attention Jay Leno. And a couple weeks later, he called up and hi, this is Jay Leno. I liked your material. I'd like to hire you as one of my writers for Monday night. And I said, you got it. Sent me a contract, sent me his fax number so I could fax the jokes to him. And I think I faxed them on Monday morning. It was either Sunday night or Monday morning. I forget which. And for the show on Monday evening. And he had probably about 4 of us that were the writers for the show. And I did that for a number of years. I think he was guest host for about 4 years. So that was what a great gig that was.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and it got me credibility with other comedians. So at that time, I worked for Joan Rivers, who was huge back then.
Sure.
Rich, famous impressionist. Yakov Smirnov, who was the very popular Russian comedian back at that time, and a number of other people that you wouldn't remember anymore. So now I'm getting into. Now I've got my foot into, or at least a few toes into the comedy business. Then Jay gets offered the job as the permanent host on the Tonight Show. Unfortunately, I was not in the union. At Ellen, I would have had to go through a lot of stuff to end up in California working on his staff. So what he did for me and for one of the other writers, he says, look, I'll work out a deal where I keep you on my staff and you guys can stay where you live. The other guy was in St. Louis, I was in Houston. So I ended up working for him for another 6 years as a writer, a monologue writer for the Tonight Show. Now, something happened at that time, and that is that the company that I was working for, this high-flying, making for fastest company to make $1 million in revenue in history, went in the opposite direction. We didn't keep up with our technology, and as a result, they were laying people off. So I could see the handwriting on the wall. Things were not going to go well for us at that company. So I went to my lovely wife and I said, look, would it be possible if I could take a year and see if I could make it expand my comedy writing business, and I don't know which way it's going to go, but I'd like to do this. And she had a good job in Houston, which had insurance. No matter how much money she was making, it was insurance that was the thing. So she said, okay. So, and here I am 30 years later. I'm still doing it. So that tells you something. That tells you that that major event, that wall in the maze that forced me to turn it in another direction, turned out okay. However, but think about this, okay? So sure, I was in the maze and I hit a wall and I made a turn, but I also had a backpack on and I had a lot of stuff to help me in my backpack. I already had a little bit of experience. I had the desire. I had the interest. So I wasn't floundering. I wasn't thrown into it cold.
Sure.
And but I'm not going to go. I won't go through the litany. I ended up working for a couple of other TV shows. I worked for Dennis Miller when he had a show. I worked for Bill Maher's first show on ABC before he went to HBO. I ended up working for a children's show, Emmy-winning children's show. We won it not for writing, unfortunately, but we still got an Emmy. So, I worked for a political humor magazine back when people still read magazines. I had a number of jobs in the magazine field. I had some stuff in the New York Times, Huffington Post published some things of mine, and then I ended up I was constantly looking through the want ads back when we had want ads and
Sure.
Craigslist. Because when you're a writer, for those of you who are interested in writing, I describe it as having 10 part-time jobs at once. There are very few full-time writing jobs anymore. Everybody has a side gig. If you're a writer, you have a side gig or
Sure.
two or four. Um, so that's what I was doing. I was constantly looking, and I saw um, an educational publisher was looking for writers, and I sent them a pitch. I said, I'm not a teacher, um, but I have some ideas about teaching kids. I was teaching kids comedy writing at the time at one of the schools in Houston, and I said, I've got some ideas about this. I've got a workbook that I put together. Um, I think there should be more humor in education. Would you be interested in taking a look at it? And they were. So I ended up being published by them. The book was called Gestercises and Game Storms, which is what I call the exercises. And that got me into some other publishing gigs. I ended up captioning picture books and writing trivia books. So my name is in as a co-author or a contributor in about 30 books. Um, and then Diane, my buddy Diana Jordan and I uh, worked together on a book. I'll hold that one up. It's called A Wife's Little Instruction Book, which is a book of jokes
Yep.
about men. So it's to prepare women for dealing with men. Uh, People ask me, I've written for a number of women, very successful female comedians. And people ask me, what is it that um, allows you to write for women when you're obviously a guy?
Yeah.
And my standard answer is my middle name is Michael, so my initials are PMS. So
I love that.
I think that's it. My parents both had good sense of humor, um, and I learned early on how to write for other people. Once I realized I wasn't going to be writing for myself on stage, I had to start thinking like other people. If you're in sales, you have to think like the person who's sitting in front of you, who you want to
Exactly.
convince to buy your product. So to stop for a second there because I minored in psychology in college, and one of the things I learned very late in life, after thinking about it a lot and going to therapy, that people have a right brain and a left brain, right side and left side. The right side is the creative side, the left side is the logical side. Um, and in many people, it's one is dominant over the other.
Sure.
So that it dictates where you end up. Um, the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I was lucky enough to have a balance between the two. On the logical side, I majored in math. I loved math. I loved programming. Um, I can think things through. I was a technic problem solver for a computer company, so I know that side is working. And then I found out that I had a lot of stuff going on the other side too, the creative side. Um, so I figured out how to put those two things together, and that book about how teaching kids how to write comedy was really a turning point for me because it brought together the formulas that comedy writers use. We all use the formula of sorts for finding the
Sure.
funny in something. But you also have to come up with the creative side. What idea? What are you going to talk about? What is that comedian going to talk about? What will make the people laugh? What will they be interested in? So those are the kinds of things. If somebody tells you, "Oh, well, you're a left brain person," you're always going to be one of those logical people. Don't listen to them. Okay, don't listen to them because you can find pathways between the two and
Absolutely.
have them work together. Yeah, yeah. So then the strange path. Uh, we continued to live in Houston until 2010. I had family. My wife and I have family in Cleveland. My mom was getting up in years, so we worked out a deal to move back to Cleveland. It was a good time in all of our lives, a time to help my mom in her later years. And just coincidentally, um, not through the move at all, because most of my jobs were far away from where I lived because of the internet. A couple of big jobs fell through. So I picked up a job working for a jazz comedy show on public radio called 12th Street Jump. And I ended up doing musical comedy for a number of years for them. And then I was writing for a funny news service where I would find strange stories and write funny copy for the news people so that they could present it. It was like a half an hour show on the internet. And so I saw an ad for another show like that. This one was going away. In fact, it was one of the ones that did go away. And so I sent my material to these guys. They were in Australia. They're looking for the same kind of thing, right? Write funny stuff for weird news stories. So called me up. They said, "Oh, you're exactly what we're looking for." But we have one requirement, and that is that instead of just plain old weird news, we talk about on their podcast and on their website UFOs, aliens, Bigfoot, Loch Ness monster, weird creatures, ghosts, haunted houses, haunted taverns. Would you be interested in doing that? I said, sure. I said, if you pay me in American money and pay me on time, let's see how it goes. And I want to, before I go further with that, the reason why I said sure, and it's another thing I like to mention to people. I rarely turn down work in my career. Rarely, even when I was in the computer business, if somebody said, I heard somebody might be interested in a computer, it may not be, they may not have, I may have known already that they're not the perfect company for what we were selling, because we were selling to a very specific industry. But I would still go. And I'd talk to them, because you never know where they might know somebody else. Right. And they would have some information for you. So that's one of those things, if you want to avoid the maze, if you want to avoid running into the wall, say yes. Say yes. Don't say no. Say yes. Say at least say maybe, but yes is better. And then be open. Be open. It may not work out immediately, but it may work out in the future. So I said yes to these guys, and that was 8 years ago. And here I am. I'm the editor of the website. I'm well known throughout the UFO field for the research that I've done and the stories that I've written about. So I collected those stories, many of the really funny, odd stories, especially about UFO and alien encounters, especially weird aliens. We always think of the little gray men or the little green. That's what everybody thinks about, and they're coming to invade us, and they're taking over the planet. Well, as Karen knows, because this is what I talk about on my podcast quite a bit, they're not all little gray men. I've talked about aliens that look like the Michelin Man from the tire commercials, aliens that bounced around on one leg like they're on a pogo stick, aliens that like polka music on their planet. And then stories about famous people who had alien encounters. John Lennon, the Rolling Stones, and believe it or not, but the first assumption everybody has is, well, they were all on drugs. That's true, but not necessarily when the UFOs and the aliens. And it's not all rock stars take drugs, but many musicians and creative people have these encounters. So I think there's something to be investigated and researched in that area. But I was just collecting the funny stories, and so they ended up. I worked on them. I collected them. I worked for about a half a year, polishing them up and punching them up and putting them into a format, and took them to a number of publishers, and one of them picked it up. And the end result is, I don't know if I can. Am I allowed to hold up?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
What would you say to a naked alien? And as Karen knows, then the naked alien story has to do with a guy in Georgia. He was 17 years old, lived on a farm. UFO. Now this is his story. Okay, UFO landed in his on the farm. Door opens, beautiful female alien comes down the steps. She has a human body and an alien head, one of those big gray pointy alien heads, and she looks at him with lust, and he doesn't know what to do. And she takes her clothes off and she wants to consummate their relationship right off the bat, you know. So they did. According to him, they ended up with 50 hybrid alien babies. He was a good father, so he
I
says.
guess so. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, no, in more ways than one. I mean, he was obviously a fertile father. But he took care of them. He went up to her spaceship and babysat, I guess, and went to the planet where I guess some of them ended up living. Um, and then he wanted to tell the story. He wanted to tell the world about this wonderful relationship he had. And they said, "Oh no, we can't let you do that. We can't let you take pictures of us or anything like that to reveal our identity." And he was a painter, and he said, "Well, would you allow me to paint pictures of you?" Not paint them with paint, because
Right.
he had to explain that,
Yeah.
because they don't know. Um, and they said, "Sure, yeah, you're a good painter." So he painted and he painted them, and not only did he paint them, but he painted them naked. He painted them the way he saw them, and also doing the things that they did that ended up with 50 alien babies. So he tried to, he took these to UFO conferences and alien conferences, and people said, "Oh, we can't, but we don't buy this." Uh, when I found him, a documentary company had discovered him and did a documentary, a short film about him that was making the rounds, and that's when I saw him. So I wrote this story, and I said, I'm not going to be judgmental. I don't know. I wasn't here. You be the judge. And so they appreciated that. They contacted me and said that his people said, "Well, we really appreciate you didn't make fun of him." And I said, "No, I don't. I wouldn't make fun of him, but I think this is such a cool story. I'd like to tell it again and figure out a funny way to do it." And it took me a long time. I thought about it, and as I collected my other stories, I thought, how can I present this? And then one day the answer came, and that was probably while we were doing a podcast, Karen. In explaining something that we were making fun of, I thought, this is it. This is it. It's not about them. It's about what would we do? What would I do if naked aliens landed in my backyard in Cleveland, Ohio? What would I do if I'm looking at a Michelin Man statue, and all of a sudden it starts talking to me because it's an alien? What would you do? Um, so because I'm a comedy writer, obviously I would come up with funny things to say. The Michelin Man, of course, the first thing I would say to him was, "You look like you're under a lot of pressure," because he's a tire guy.
Right.
Or yeah, or you came just in time. We have a real inflation problem on our planet. Maybe you can help us. So, and then I asked the question. I try to lead the readers down the path. What would you do if it was you? Now, the naked alien, obviously, I ask women. What if it's a naked male alien? Well built. Arnold Schwarzenegger or whoever the well built people are these days. Uh, what kind of decision would you make? I look at myself. If I was 17 years old, I'd be running up those steps so fast that you wouldn't see. There'd be a cloud of dust behind me.
And
What
then
if
you
I?
go say your Hail Marys, right?
Oh, that's right. So, but if I'm my age today, I'm married, so obviously I would say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm married. I have a single friend I could possibly fix you up with." Or I might say, if I was single, "Is your mom on board, or maybe your grandma?" How old she was, and the generational things in the alien culture. So my goal with the book was to get people to think, be prepared. If we listen to the media and we listen to the movie industry, movie and television industry, but movies in particular, where we get the most information about aliens. It's always bad. It's always one kind of alien, and they're threatening us. Um, I found so many stories of aliens that were not threatening at all. One story about a farmer, they landed in his field and they asked him for some water. And he said, sure. He gets a bucket and he gives them some water. They go back up into the spaceship. They come down a few minutes later with waffles. 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 You know, so what first thing he says was, what, no eggs? You know, what, an alien brings you waffles, you eat them. That's what he did. He ate some.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and he lived to tell the tale. That's right.
I, and you know, as,
Yeah,
as you as you tell your story, this is exactly why we have this show, because it's not that we're avoiding the maze, okay? But we're avoiding not being aware of those opportunities. And you took those opportunities in your life. And
sure.
that is so important. I mean, you know, I mentioned to my husband that you wrote the book, and he goes, oh, sounds interesting. And we've been having this conversation back and forth about what would we say to a naked alien. That's been our banter going on. And yet in his mind, because he's one of these people who sees everything in black and white, it's like, well, you know, who's going to read it? Where's it going to go? And I said, but you never know. And
Mm,
we all need that break from the real world. And that's what we do in your show every week. We're
yes.
taking that break from the real world, although they're real stories. And I
Yep.
love what you said, that, you know, people of fame claim they have seen and had encounters with aliens. Who are we to question that? I mean,
Right.
I would love to have that encounter. I would love to be able to, and maybe I still will in my lifetime, but it does make for banter. It does make for fun.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with a good laugh here and there.
No. Oh no. You know, when I got into the humor field, I read everything that I could find on humor. And back then there was a guy, Dr. Norman Cousins, and he talked about the healing power of laughter. In fact, I think that was the name of one of his books. And I got into reading those books and humor in the workplace. I used to do workshops on using humor in the workplace. Uh, just the importance. I'll give you a simple example. If you know, so many people work in customer service, you know, somebody calls up and they've got a complaint, or they need more information. They're calling about an order, and you can influence how you sound on the phone by your attitude. So I would tell people, I said, you know, put a mirror in front of you and smile into the mirror before you answer the phone. I said, in between calls, have a cartoon up on your wall and look at that funny cartoon, and that puts you in a better mood. Um, there's so many things that you could do like that. Now, in you what you're talking about, Karen, with the maze, um, you need to be you should be prepared. Okay, I don't want to say I stumbled through life and you know, let things happen and made a decision as a result. No, you should be prepared. I'm a person I have a good sense of humor, but I nurture my sense of humor. I love going to comedy clubs. I love watching comedy on TV or in the movies. So I feed the muse. But that muse is not just for my writing career. I did that when I was in the computer business. Um, so you have to do things like that. And you hit it on the head. You know, we talk about the weird side of the news. We're already bombarded with all the negativity and the bad news. For 23 hours a day, 24 hours a day, take a half an hour or take an hour and push all that out and fill your head with something good, something positive, something funny. That's what I do, something funny. You'd be you'll be amazed at how it changes your thinking. It might change your thinking to maybe I should do this more often. It might change your thinking to um, maybe I should listen to a different mainstream media
Yep.
source, that sort of thing. So you just don't know. You don't know, but don't be afraid to not know. Don't be afraid to walk up to the wall. You can't see, you've reached the end. Don't be afraid to turn. Don't be afraid to turn left. You might walk into the wall. Okay, well, you're in a maze. You're still going to get out. There's a way out. Turn right, turn left, turn right, turn in the opposite direction, and follow that path and see where that goes. And be open, be open, be prepared.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's yeah. So have fun doing it.
And when you talk about the power of laughter, this goes back about almost exactly 11 years ago. I had surgery. I went back to work, and things just weren't the same when I went back. Okay. I felt the same, but everything around me just felt really wrong. And I realized it was the culture. Being away from that environment,
Yeah.
I had developed other ideas of how I wanted to be. And so I went back to work wanting to be this refreshed person. And instead, I was being bombarded by things that just depressed me, but didn't know I was depressed. I couldn't put my finger on it. And when I finally got diagnosed 6 months later, my husband said to me one day, "We're going to the comedy club." And I looked at him and I said, "I'm not going to come. I don't want to laugh. I'm not happy. Leave me alone." And he goes, "You're going." And he took me kicking and screaming down to the comedy club. And I sat there before it started, kept saying, "I'm angry. I don't want to be here." As soon as the first comic got on stage, I don't think he was funny, but I couldn't stop laughing. And I realized that is my medicine. If I need to brighten myself up, I'll turn on the comedy channel. Okay.
Yeah.
Or my husband and I will go to the comedy club. And I didn't understand for a long time why my husband likes to watch old sitcoms. And this weekend, it hit me because number one, there's a laugh track. And
Yep.
number two, a lot of the old sitcoms they're funny. There's maybe stupid type jokes, but they get you to smile and laugh. And that brightens his mood. So now that I understand it, he can watch me TV as much as he wants because it makes him happy. But I want to go back to the book for 1 second. You started working for Mysterious Universe, so that sort of got you more in line with aliens and these type of stories. Do you have a particular so-called alien that is your favorite, or
My favorite, that sounds like a sitcom title.
yeah,
My favorite Martian. I like the polka playing aliens. That story, same beginning. Spaceship lands. This guy was in Wisconsin. Door opens up. Another female alien comes out. She looked more human. Right? She had a beret. She wore a skirt and sunglasses. And she comes down the ramp and she comes to meet him, and she introduces herself as the captain of the ship. And I guess she was good looking, because he listened to her and she wasn't intimidating, but he could hear something in the background that sounded awfully familiar. And he said, what is that coming out of your spaceship? And she says, "Oh, that's polka music. The polka is the music of our planet."
What?
Now, why is that funny to me? Karen knows, Cleveland is the polka capital of the United States,
Right.
the second largest Polish population next to Warsaw of major cities. Okay, so we have a huge, going all the way back to what we talked about at the very beginning, to Goulardi making fun of the polkas and the ethnic people in Cleveland. So that story just hit me, and I didn't know the story until I was doing the research for the book, because I knew the other half of it, which is that he fell in love with the female alien and left his wife for the alien. And in the divorce decree, it states, my ex-husband left me to go with a space alien. So they convinced other people that this was why he was doing it. I thought, oh my God, what this is great. Um, so that's my favorite story, by far. I don't know if I have a favorite alien. I like the Michelin Men because it's just such a silly thing that's so uh, well known. It's a well known icon
Right.
of advertising. So I thought you were going to ask me how if a lot of people ask me, how long ago was I interested in UFOs, and I explained in the book, in the opening to the book, that it goes back. I realized that when I was a kid, my mom would take, you just like everybody else, your mom takes you to the grocery store, and what a pain that is when you're a little kid. You're getting dragged around, so you got to wait while she picks out the lunch meat and such boring stuff. No chocolate cereal. Once you got your cereal, that's all you care about. And then finally you get to the checkout, and all the other kids loved it because that's where the candy was. And
Right.
they were all candy off the shelf. I happen to notice, because I look at other things, I look on the opposite side of the candy, and there were magazines over there. And some of the magazines back in those days were the tabloids that talked about, UFO lands at the White
Right.
House, Eisenhower meets with aliens, and Elvis is taken to another planet, gets, you know, uh, anti-gravity blue suede shoes. With, you know, uh, kid, I that stuff. I thought, oh wow, can you believe I want this? So my poor mom, she's so embarrassed that she just pulls him away. Like that. He takes after his father. That's what he gets that from. I realized I liked that weird stuff. And the first book that I can remember reading and really loving was a Ripley's Believe It or Not book. Uh, and back when we were kids, Robert Ripley was a cartoonist and an adventurer. So two completely different
Yeah.
careers merged together. And what he would do is in the daily comics, but also in the Sunday comics, he'd have a big long strip of weird stuff that he found. A guy who lived with an arrow through his head, and real things. The 8 foot tall man that. I love that stuff. So that book, that was my favorite book. I couldn't wait till I was old enough and go to the Ripley Museum. So I've always liked those weird stories. And when we moved back to Cleveland, I found a box that we had moved with us in our various moves, and I knew it was a box of books. Um, and I finally opened it up after like 25 years. And buried in the bottom were a number of paperback books I bought when I was a kid about UFO encounters. So I had completely forgotten that I had those. So it goes all the way back, but you do different things. You follow different paths, and I have never had a UFO encounter. I've never met an alien. I've never met Bigfoot. I've seen UFOs. I tell everybody, you want to see a UFO, go outside. Go look up at the sky at night. I guarantee you, in 10 minutes, you're going to see something flying overhead that you don't know what it is. That is a unidentified flying object. Is it a spaceship? I don't know. There's people who can tell you if it is, but there's those same people sometimes say, we don't know what it is either. Okay,
Exactly.
that mean it's an alien spaceship? No, it doesn't. Okay, you could investigate further, or you could join NASA, or there's all kinds of things you can do. Same with Bigfoot. Um, if you want to have a Bigfoot encounter, you have to go in the woods. I'm
Go
sorry.
looking. Right.
We're so fortunate up here in Northeast Ohio Karen and I both live near the Cuyahoga Valley National Forest. You live right in the midst of it.
Right.
Uh, you can go in there and you can hear strange sounds and you can smell strange smells and you can find things that you can't identify. That's what people do. Okay. And you can identify most of those things, but at some point something becomes unidentifiable. And then you have to decide, well, what could this be? And that's where the mystery comes. If then you go back and you look at the legend, the Native Americans who lived here in Ohio, they had a creature that they used to hear that they couldn't identify, and they ended up calling it the Ohio Grass Man, which was their Bigfoot. So, so if you're interested in history, okay, the study of this always fascinated me. I like ghost stories, not so much about the ghost, but about the building that they're in, because the building, they're usually old, they've got a lot of history, and something could have happened in the history of that
Sure.
building that had an impact on the people that lived there, and maybe, I don't know for sure, maybe kept their spirits trapped there, or did something to the electricity in the air that caused the people who came into that building to see strange things. We don't know. We don't know. I certainly don't know. If there was an answer to it, I guarantee the news stories, the news channels would stop talking about politics and they'd
Right.
start talking.
Exactly. Exactly.
If
So who,
aliens landed in Cleveland,
yeah,
we all news would cover it. All news would cover it. So there's a good chance that we haven't seen them yet. But that doesn't mean you should stop looking, and that doesn't mean they don't exist.
absolutely.
Same same with opportunities for people. Just because it's not in front of you, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Doesn't mean you should stop looking. People ask me, how do I get into, how do I become a writer? Do you like to write? Well, yeah. Do you ever write? Well, no. Okay, here's the first project.
You
I
know,
learned how. Yeah, I learned how to write comedy. I read a book, and one of the tips was to copy either from a book, copy the words word for word. So that gets you. The author said he did it with Ulysses of all books, so he could learn how to write great literature. He copied Ulysses word for word. I used to watch the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, and I would write out his jokes word for word, or I'd record it and write them out. And that's how I could see the words, and my hand made the motion, and my fingers did the same thing that someone else did. And slowly but surely, the more you do it, you get into the habit of writing, and you start to change your brain into thinking you can do it. I guarantee, don't be intimidated by a blank piece of paper. All it needs is one little squiggle on it, and it's not blank anymore. Put some more things on there. It may not be till the very end of the page that you write something that's consequential, but you did. You did. Okay. And that's your start right there.
well,
And then flip it over.
you
And,
know,
and
as
then
I tell a lot of people, I always wanted to be in broadcasting. I grew up in the 60s. Everyone looked at me and said, why? I mean, what woman is going to make it in broadcasting? But when I decided to start a podcast, this was almost 13 years ago, and my son was doing an internship at an internet radio station, and he was living my dream. He was doing a podcast. In fact, he was doing it 4 nights a week, and I was so jealous. And I went to the same company and I said, I have an idea for a podcast. And they looked at me like, okay, yeah, mom, whatever. And I told them my idea, and they said, okay, we'll give you a slot Tuesday afternoons at 2:00. I knew not one thing about podcasting, but I got a guest. And in fact, the guest, oh, I can't even think of his name right now. He used to be a radio personality here, but he's working for the Red Cross. And I knew he, you know, he could draw people in. And I told him basically it was going to be a conversation like this. What got you into broadcasting? Why did you leave broadcasting? And now you're working for the Red Cross. And if you heard his story, it's basically the same thing, that at the Red Cross, he's using his speaking engagements and stuff. Okay. So he didn't really leave what he was good at. And after I got off that podcast, the people at the company said to me, "How long have you been doing this?" And I said, today was my first time. And they said, "Don't ever tell that to anybody again, because this
Oh.
is what you should do." And so I stayed with them for about a year, until I went off on my own. And so like you, if it's something you want to do it, try it. It's like, if there's an elephant in the room, if you don't take your first bite of the elephant, you're not going to know if it's good or bad. So
Right.
take
Yeah.
a taste. So hold up
Research.
the book and show it to us again.
Oh, yeah. Research it. Do some due diligence. Read about other people. I love reading about other people in the comedy field, in the UFO field. Read about other people and how they did it. That's what this show is right here. What were the decisions that you made? What was the training that you got? What was the lack of training that you managed to overcome? What were the objections? As Karen said, you learn that in sales, but you also get objections in a lot of other fields as well.
Absolutely.
And as I always say, I rarely turn down business. And that always led me to something. I always learned something as a result of doing that. So not necessarily what I wanted, not necessarily what I expected, not necessarily money, but more often than not, at some point down the line, all those things did happen. So yeah, the book is called "What Would You Say to a Naked Space Alien?" It's available on Amazon. Just look up my name or go to paulseaburn.com. I have a link there to the Amazon site. Also to my podcast on newclevelandradio.net. What in the world? Boy, how many? We've been doing this for 7 years now, really?
Yeah. Can you believe it? Wow.
What fun. What
Yes,
fun.
it
And
is.
that is an absolute true story about going into the Chinese restaurant.
Well,
Opportunity. I
yeah.
was bored. Karen knows the story. I was bored. I needed something to read. There's two things in a Chinese restaurant to read: the menu, which I knew, and a stack of business cards. And I grabbed the business card, and Karen's business card was in there. That's how that happened. So
Yep.
perfect example. Perfect example.
Well, we're glad that you did that. I'm excited about the book. And for all of you who are listening, if you listen to us on What in the World, you'll hear more about the book because we plug it regularly. And Paul, make $1 million, zillion on it, and then take your beautiful wife on a around the world cruise
Oh yeah, in a UFO. Yeah.
in a UFO. Love it. You take care. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Karen.
Bye
Thanks,
now.
everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.